Let's make some noise. I don't know why I was whispering. It's pretty warm. How's everybody doing? It is 7:03. Tonight we are going to talk about the video that I just put up today, and that is Jack the Ripper, because it rips all the way to 7,700. Actually, I think it pretty easily would have gone to 8,000. I know guys have done that on Junkyard motors. This was cool because, I mean, it was cool that it did what it did. And after our discussions before, that, you know, we were talking about the one that made 511 or 512 or something with the fast manifold on it. How do we now get it to, you know, thanks to you guys, now, how do we now get it to make 100 horsepower per liter? Because that's the next step. So we needed to get to 530 horsepower. So, hey, just more camshaft and a high RPM manifold and throw that in, and voila, that's all you have to do. And then you look like a hero as long as you want to rev the motor. And we did with the springs that we put in it were Brian Tooley's high RPM springs, so that they were shimmed properly, so that they have, you know, the right distance from coil bind given the camshaft they were using. The camshaft was a 636 lift, so, you know, it's right there. So, and also the camshaft that was used is a pretty stable cam profile at that RPM. That's the stage 4 LS cam. Again, all just like off the shelf stuff, no custom cam. You know, to make all the power that you're going to make with the custom cam. The thing that's getting interesting with this combination, one, we shifted the RPM up quite a bit. We're making power out on the big end, as it were. And so good camshaft, good intake manifold, all that's working out. We have more than enough cylinder head. We've got enough cylinder head to support another 100 horsepower probably. So that's there. We just need more RPM or more motor, you know, something. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. What do we need to do to this 5.3 to get it to make more power? What do you guys think? Here are the things that we're thinking of so far. So if you put this in the comments, you're thinking along the same lines we are. One of the things obviously is different kinds of fuel. So we could run E85. I want to run methanol. I haven't done it. So this would be a good opportunity to do that. I don't know, given the like near 10-to-1 compression, because all this is a stock, you know, it's a stock flat top piston, but this is like a 62 or 65 cc chamber right now, because it's a set of 220 as cast heads that are no longer as cast because Brian did some work to them. So, and I think that's the chamber size. So we're not too far off of, you know, factory compression. So I think we're near 10-to-1. So not a lot. It's not 11-to-1. It's not 12-to-1. Not where we would like it to be, but where we would like it to be, there's going to be a trade-off with available piston to valve clearance. And we're already near the end of that anyway with the camshaft that we have in it, because that's a 233, 250 something. We're not too worried about the exhaust side, but definitely on the intake side. And I was talking to Brian about that today. He said, well, you could, you know, just notch them yourself. Just put notches in those factory pistons, because we were talking about changing pistons. And quite honestly, I think if I put forged pistons in it, we're going to lose power compared to the sealing that we get with a factory piston. And that's a discussion we can have on another live feed, because I think that that's a reality. I think that if we take the factory pistons out and put forged pistons in of the same design, of the same flat top design, and run it so that there's no compression height difference or anything, so that all of that's the same, I bet we lose power with the forged pistons. And I've seen that in my tests, and then talking to Brian and other guys, other engine builders, they've seen the same thing. So it's something. The other opportunity with fuel is there are other intakes that we could try, maybe a cross ram, maybe a performance design intake manifold. I don't know how much better, or if it would be better in the cathedral port version than this Trinity intake manifold. The Trinity intake manifold is pretty good for peak power, which is kind of what we're looking at, a big number here. So that'd be interesting. Maybe I have some Super Richie dual plenum manifolds that I could try, and we could see if there's something there. That would be interesting. The one thing I do want to try is, and I know that James Short tried this when he was doing testing back with the Trinity intake manifold on their other applications, on their LS7 and LS3 applications. He just took the center section out of it basically and just ran it as an IR deal with just the runners. And it definitely picked up power there. So I'd like to try that. I'm not going to do it the way that he did it. it will probably mean that I have to sacrifice a plenum because I want to cut the plenum off and be able to just go to wide open throttle and then just take the lid off. That's a much easier deal than the way that they did it. The other way for me to do it is take the plenum out, and then I could put what I'm envisioning is I'm just going to make plates with small holes in the plates, just bleed holes, just throttle holes, so that then we could start the motor and have it idling using these holes, these very small holes that are in 8 of the things with just plates. And then when we want to go to wide open throttle, so we would tune it with the intake manifold the way that it is, and then take the thing apart, take the plenum off, put the runners in there, put the plates on there, start it up with just holes in the plates, basically vacuum leaks, as it were, or with the throttle blade, to simulate the throttle blade open just a little bit. And then what you do is just slide the plates out of the way, and then that's wide open throttle. And then you just shut it off at the end of the dyno run. That's the way that I would do it. That's not the way James did it. They did it in a pretty cool way on their dyno. They just started it up with it open like that and then controlled the dyno. But this way is easy, and it's closer in line with what we do normally. So I think it would work pretty well. That's something. The other thing that I want to do is I want to make a fuel rail so I can slide the fuel rail inside the manifold. Again, it would help to remove the lid. I want the fuel rail inside the manifold with injectors aiming at the entry of the port so we can have more fuel cooling. We're displacing some of the air. So there's a discussion to be had about that. Also, let me know in the comments what you guys think about that. That's another idea that I want to try. Fuel cooling typically improves power, so we want to try that. And those are the things that we're thinking. We're limited in camshaft, kind of. We're not limited in intake. We could do some stuff there. I don't think we need to do anything more to the heads. If we try to cut the heads more or try to raise the compression, we're minimizing piston to valve. We have to adjust for that. I'd like not to put, I'd like it to be stock bottom end. I'd like it to continue to go to be stock bottom end. We could go to M1. We could try this motor with nitromethane and see what happens. That would be fun. I'd like to try that. That would be interesting. We'd need giant size injectors to do it. And on an NA motor like this would be the way to go. It'd actually be better to try it on a stock one so that we had enough injector, because we have to have 7 or 8 times the amount of fuel flow. So you could see that's a lot. That's a whole bunch. And when you're talking about, a 500 horsepower motor and you have to have 8 times the fuel flow that you currently have, it's a bunch. And so you have to have enough injector. Or the other way to do it is, I think Brian has, and I don't know if they have them for cathedral port stuff yet, but they have some Trinity manifolds that they've done with dual injectors in it. And that would really be the way to go. As long as your computer obviously can do that. But that would be kind of cool to get it to, and if we could get the thing to make like 1,000 horsepower on nitromethane, that would be kind of awesome. That would be the world record NA 5.3 liter if only we could get enough fuel to it. But the other problem is that we run across is displacement. So, just like with nitrous, as we add a whole bunch of nitrous, we're displacing some of the fuel. So that's one reason why it works really well and why we want to do it. Brian and I want to do it on a direct injected motor. We want to run nitromethane on a direct injected motor. But we have the same problem, is how can we get enough fuel to it and to make the power, because how can we flow enough fuel? But the nice thing is, in that instance, we're not limiting the amount of airflow going through the cylinder heads by doing that, which is a benefit for making power. So all of these things to consider. Let me know what you guys think about what we should do to try on this motor. All of those things are open. I don't want to run boost. We want to do it NA, and obviously boost is, and we've done Junkyard 5.3s with boost at lots and lots of power anyway. So that's not really the thing. So let me know what you guys think. If there's anything else we could try, 8-into-1 header. I don't know that there's anything there. Maybe other kinds of headers, because the only headers that I've run on here are the 1 7/8 hook or swap headers. And they work, obviously. An 1 7/8 header works on this and it makes good power. But there might be others that would make even more with this particular combination of intake manifold, runner length, and RPM optimization, and then the cam timing to go along with that. So let me know. Water meth people are putting in there, and that's the other conversation I want to have, but we'll have that on another time. I want to talk about the fact that if you run a motor on methanol and the motor benefits from methanol, it gains power from running on methanol versus running on gas, which is not unusual. The discussion will be, why doesn't water methanol or just methanol injection itself, even when you're adding it as a small percentage, why don't you see a gain with that? And should you? That will be the discussion. So we got to have a poll for tonight. Okay, can the stock bottom end 5.3 liter, the one that's we're talking about in this video, can it ever make 600 horsepower? 600, we're going to put NA horsepower so people are not thinking, oh yeah, easy with boost or nitrous. No boost or nitrous. No boost or NOS. Let me know what you guys think. That's a long ways away. It was a lot easier to get to the to go from 510 or 12 or whatever to 530. That's a pretty easy jump. Let's see what people got going on for tonight. Julius, what's up? Is the BTR equalizer similar to the low RAM? Yeah, I don't know about power because I haven't run the two together. But similar in design in that they're both a front entry, short runner, common plenum kind of thing. What's the best displacement for a Tirali engine cooler on a boosted application? What are you trying to cool? And are you asking what the best displacement of the motor is? I'm a little confused about what you're asking there. It's an LY5, but aluminum engine. It's 9.9 to 1 compression, 799 headed aluminum 5.3. I don't know what that's in reference to. The motor that we ran is an L33. Any point to lightening the rotating assembly? Could you take material out of the crank and shorter piston skirts, or is that picking at straws? I don't think machining what we have is really a viable deal because I don't really want to change it. You could put a lightweight knife edge crank and all that in there, and that probably would help. But I don't know about doing that to the one that we have. On this L33, I need to replace that crank because if you look at the snout on it, and this was from the damper slipping before, with both of the blowers, when testing the AMR 500, the bolt came loose and the damper was spinning on the crank. But the reason that it was doing that is because before that, when I was doing the blower testing before with that Ford blower, same thing happened, but because I didn't pin the crank, and I need to. Forgot all the advice on the 305 you've been giving me. I grew 2 inches and now it's a 307. It's the same thing. Both of those motors do the same thing. Stepped header with a slightly shorter runner length for high RPM. Maybe. We do have a set of step headers there. BTR rocker arm trunnion kit would help stabilize the valve train for high RPM. The curve is really smooth, and I don't know if we have a stabilization issue, but otherwise I agree. I think that this thing is running at an RPM where we should start thinking about that. Maybe a shaft setup or at least a trunnion kit because this thing has a lot of miles on it. Time for some NASCAR tri-wise and a Super Richie intake manifold. Julius, what's up? Best placement, meaning position of an engine oil cooler on a boosted application. Okay, now we can get specific. Where do you mean by best placement? Are you talking about the best placement for the cooler, like up in front of the radiator? Or are you talking about the heat exchanger or the adapter? Off subject, but what cam do you recommend for an L77 6 liter in a 95 S10 turbo 350? 3500 stall, 411 gears. How much, Ryan, how much power are you trying to make and how big of a turbo are you using? If you're trying to only make 1,000 horsepower or less, I would put a small camshaft in it. Hello from 9 Mile Falls. Where's that at? That would be a really long waterfall. That setup is in a car or truck. How much horsepower would it be killed by using the aluminum compared to the composite? The aluminum what? Intake manifold? I would like to. Are you thinking that the factory or a composite intake manifold doesn't heat soak or something? I would actually like to see that test. I'm thinking about doing that test because I want to see what happens, because the airflow going through the motor cannot pick up power. I mean, cannot pick up heat. The intake manifold can get hot, but the airflow through the manifold, it doesn't have time to change temperature. Kyle, I vote for grinding valve release in the stock pistons. That's been done. More cam duration and more RPM. Can you make a Coyote competitor with a 5.3? I think it's worth a shot. Stock bottom end LS guys are 8,500. Some of them are. I don't know. The guys that are running lots of RPM are usually doing boosted motors, but it would be interesting. 2 horsepower per cubic inch is difficult, but doable. So 2 horsepower per cubic inch would be 650 horsepower. I don't know that we could get that from a stock bottom end. And 2 horsepower per cubic inch is going to be a dry sump motor probably. So following up on the light crank, do all the 5.3s use the same crankshaft or are there different cranks throughout the years? I think that they're all the same. In fact, I think that they're the same crank as a 6.0 and a 6.2 and a 5.7. Oh, Ben from Car Farm. He's sending me images. This might be something. Might be something to buy. Ooh, it's the under hood shot of the painted underside of the hood. Nice. I'm assuming you mean 600 crank horsepower. Then yes. Can it make 600 wheel horsepower stock? Maybe. I've seen some dynos do it, but that can be manipulated. You've seen a 5.3 make 600 wheel horsepower naturally aspirated with a stock bottom end? That seems like an awful lot. If you ever want to revisit the 20 LS manifold test, I have several more you can run. I reference an article like once a week. What other manifolds do you have that haven't been tested? Heat exchanger before or after the turbo? I'm trying to think how we did the the heat exchanger should be before the turbo, because that's going to be on the pressure side feeding the turbo. If you're having are you having the oil cooler on the line going to the turbo? If it's going to the turbo, then definitely. Otherwise, all you're doing is if it's not in line with the turbo and you're just cooling the engine oil, it doesn't matter where you put it. As long as it's pressurized and it's going through an exchanger, you're not trying to just cool the oil either going to the turbo. On the drain side of the turbo, obviously is not a good idea, but it doesn't matter. You're trying to cool all of the oil that's in the oil pan. That's the thing that you're concerned with. We need some high compression for 600 NA horsepower on a 5.3. I agree. I don't know that you're going to get to it with a stock bottom end and 10-to-1 compression. No turbo 350 trans, just hoping to change the cam and valve springs. Okay, so Ryan, I'm going to go back and look at your... Oh, okay. So what intake is on there and like what kind of RPM range do you want to run? That's enough. And are you racing this thing with a 3500 installed and 411 gears? I'm assuming that this is a race motor. And so what's the intake and cylinder heads that you have on this thing? Curious if the intake port position fuel injector setup does better than an old school TBI. The thing that the TBI has going for it is that it's cooling the charge air. The bad side of the TBI is that it's insufficiently sized to make lots of power, and the intake manifold's not great. But like a carburetor, fuel cooling is or charge cooling from the fuel is a good idea. Torque Racing Production. In the Richard spirit of dyno testing, I'm going to do a back-to-back comparison of regular long tube headers and an equal length 8-into-1 header setup on my LS1. What vehicle are you testing that on? That will be cool. Please let me know what happens. Everybody has asked about 8-to-1 headers. I think they sound awesome, and we see them on sand rails and stuff where they have room and that looks fancy and it sounds good. I just don't know. I haven't tried to run one on the dyno though. Here said the intake port position fuel injector setup does better than an old school TBI. Well, the nice thing about port injection is that you can individually tune the cylinders, but which you can't do with TBI. This is almost my question for the last video. Was that about the making this much power or something? Would love to see this combo with a 5.7 and then a 383, similar to my build. Stock bottom end LS6 MSD Atomic Air Force, milled and ported, 243s, stage 4 NA cam, 1 7/8 headers. Yeah, that should be a good combination. Will Gen 5 L8T crank work in a Gen 5 L86? Would it need pistons and rods too? It's a different stroke, right? I have a 93 Camaro Z28, which at the time has a Gen 2 LT1 engine in it. I'm looking at getting an 08 Silverado. Vortec engine, what kind of horsepower can we be looking at by putting heads in cam? Well, did you look at the 5.3 that we just did? If you put the right heads in cam and intake manifold on it, you can make a lot of power. Our LS is as picky about windage trays as big block Chevys. The LS has a factory windage tray, so it does pretty well. But I kind of would like to try something else to see if there's more to be had there. Wouldn't a 60-40 gas mix help with making NA power? What are we mixing that with? (16/16 cam. Yep. That's a lot more than a 3/4 or 7/8 cam. I think the early 6-liter cranks are a tad longer. Yeah, there's a difference between the iron-headed motors and the crank flanges, and then also there's a difference for the cranks on the LS4s too, I think. But otherwise, there's nothing unique about the different displacements. The crank, they all share that same stroke crank. 600 wheel horsepower stock bottom end. I'd like to see that. Around cars might be worth another 10, depending on runners. Does the high ram have the same tops as the high ram? The low ram and the high ram share the same lids. You can run both of those. When I ran the comparison we did that on an LS1 on a 5.7, and I also did it on something else, a 6-liter, I think. We did do it on 6-liter because I did it on the intake shootout. When we do a high ram with carburetors on it, it does make more power. Stock L77 intake, stock cylinder head. What intake came on that? I mean, what cylinder head came on that? Yeah, torque production. Let me know. I'd be curious to see what the 8 and the 1 does. Will a radius entry do anything on NA? Well, we talked about that on the. I just ran it with an open throttle body when I was running on the dyno, but most people run them with a tube or at the very least a radius air entry on the throttle body, and I think that might pick up. You know, it might pick up some. I can see a North Star engine rev to 8,000. Or the heads are similar to the Vortec. Yeah, I read Calvin, or I watched Calvin's thing. If you want to test them all at the same time again, I have every single stock Cathedral intake, including the weird 2005 only Trailblazer LH6 non-TBSS intake. What is a non-TBSS intake then? What's weird about that one? I want a set of iron Ellis heads. We threw away the iron Ellis heads that we had because they came off of Chad's motor, and I think we just threw them away. LAT has a longer stroke. I want a factory stroke and the extra torque of the LAT. Well, if it has a longer stroke, then you either have to change the connecting rod length or you have to change the compression height of the piston to have it be in the same deck height block. The oxygenated fuels will make more horsepower. Another interesting test might be showing folks 10-to-1 motor on 93 versus 116. Takes ignition timing and fuel adjustments to make the same dyno curve. Yeah, I haven't seen a big change in power from us running different things on different octanes. Matt, what's my favorite modern V8? I don't really have favorites. I like what I like seeing is a difference. I like seeing the dyno curve and then making it change somehow, making you hopefully more, but sometimes less. Remember old Engine Masters where they did cylinder mixing distribution and guess that the standard 11-to-1, 12-to-1 airfield for wide open throttle performance might be a historical crutch for an imbalance condition? That could be. Have you done a test where they did a perfect 8-cylinder balance? So did individual cylinder trims is what you're talking about, then leaning out to see the knock limit? Well, the knock limit you can do without having them all be the same. If they're going to reach the knock limit, they're going to reach the knock limit at the same time. So wherever that is in an individual cylinder, you could get there doing that one cylinder, or you could do all of them. So I don't know what the 8-cylinder balance thing is going to do for an individual cylinder change. I vote running ethanol, then methanol on your 5.3 going for 600, maybe an 80-20 methanol, nitromethane. See, that's the thing we could do if we had enough fuel. Like we can't go 100% nitromethane because we might not have enough injector for that. But maybe we could do some percentage of it. The Atlas needs to be put back together. Never throw parts away. Yeah. But they were iron heads. With more streetable cams like the BTR Hot Rod or Red Hot still rev to 7,700. A cam, the motor and the cam will rev that high. It just doesn't make power up there. A cam that size just doesn't make power there. It would make power higher than it did with the fast manifold. E23 cylinder heads will be upgrading the intake down the road. Okay, those are good cylinder heads. See, now, Charlie, you have me wondering what the... Because we did that with the hot rod cam. We ran the red hot cam to make the big number, and then Brian wanted to know if would the hot rod cam even make 500? I'm like, I think it will. And so we ran it, and it just barely. And so now I wonder what the red hot cam would do with that intake manifold. See, this is how it all starts. Throw some compression at it. Again, I don't want to change the piston on it. I want it to be a stock bottom end. The Hoonigans just did a this versus that with Sentry 6th Gen SS, the 6th Gen 1. What is Sentry? I don't know what you mean. You're saying that they're comparing it to something, but I don't know what the two things that you have that they're comparing there. Motor Trend have two articles on making 600 horsepower on a stock bottom end 5.3, one all engine and one boosted. They don't have one where you make 600 horsepower on a 5.3 all motor, because those would be my stories, and nobody from Motor Trend has done that other than me. So are you sure it's not 500? 600 we made with boost pretty easy. That's a stock one, but not 600 all motor, unless the 600 all motor was a stroker version. That's possible, and I think that that's probably what it is. But those are both mine. Not with a 5.3 displacement though. Have a Gen 4 aluminum 5.3 when doing the DoD delete. Do I need different push rods, or can I use the stock ones? It depends on what the base circle of your cam is going to be. But normally you can reuse the stock ones. If it's a 7400-ish push rod, that's going to be close. Just check it when you put it in. A stock 6-liter crank is we've done 1500 with those, so it's fine. It's an 0853 Vortec engine, an LS1 engine. I'm pretty sure the only difference is I think the intakes are higher on the Vortec engine. The LS is an engine family that lots of engines belong to: 4853, 57, 60, 62, 7-liter. That's how people describe them. This is the LS engine family. An LS1 is a specific motor. Was the first LS. It was aluminum, all aluminum. It's 5.7, 345 horsepower. And then they have other versions of other engines that range in different sizes and different power outputs. But they do have different intake manifolds. The LS1, especially the early ones, had a terrible intake manifold. It's the second worst intake manifold that they made for that engine family. The first one is the LS4. The truck intake manifold on all of the trucks are really good. And then the Trailblazer SS, which is an upgraded truck one, is even better, arguably one of the best. When you find the tune for a 600 horsepower on a stock 5.3 bottom end, let me know. I'd like to see that. I think it's going to say nitromethane on it. Okay, Travis, 2005 LH6 comes with a Gen 3 truck intake, but with a 4-bolt Gen 4 throttle body. So is it a 90 millimeter 4-bolt throttle body, or is it a 78 millimeter 4-bolt throttle body? Why would Xbox send me a message? How about a vacuum pump? That's possible. A belt powered intake. Julius, what are you doing, man? I thought we went through that already. I don't want it to cost you any more money. Now there's E10 and gasoline. Can we mix 10% nitromethane? We should, right? But if I'm going to do nitromethane, I have to at least mix it with methanol. What do you think is the easiest aftermarket controller for a not very mechanical person to attempt for an LS swap? If you're doing an LS swap, I think you should do a factory ECU and harness, and then just go to Sloppy Mechanics and get a tune from Matt that's just going to go in and work. Change the gasket or mill the heads. The heads have already been milled 30, and we don't want to go too much more than that. You start running into intake fitment problems. And then the gasket already is a 41 gasket. Not too much we can go. And again, as we do that, we also give away piston to valve clearance. It's always something. What's the max compression with a stock bottom end? I don't know. We could get more compression as long as we give up camshaft. Is it a standard flywheel from the dyno? Can you put a lightweight one on it right now? And that's an excellent idea. Because I don't think we have an aluminum flywheel. We have flex plates that have come off of the motors, because most of the motors that I get from the wrecking yard have been truck motors with automatics in them. I don't think I've ever run one with attaching the drive plate to a flex plate, but the drive plate is aluminum, but the flywheel's iron. And I've done a test on a small block Chevy, because we have both of those for the small block Chevy. We have an aluminum flywheel and an aluminum drive plate. And then we also have a steel flywheel and a steel drive plate. And I did that test where we ran those two things just on the same motor. And it doesn't upset the balance or anything, because the balances are the same. And it definitely changes the power output. But, and here's the weird thing, on the new dyno, on the power marks, it won't, which is why I don't like the way that thing's done. Richard, I have a good pair of iron 6-liter heads if you want them as a donation. I appreciate it. Thanks. I just don't know what I would run them on. And they're just heavy. Actually learned my build from your videos. A car is a road course car, so running 102 fast, 706s, stage 4 cam, custom 8-into-1. Nice. The higher PM 5.3 has all the head and intake to make 600 horsepower. Grind some reliefs, lots more duration, and see 8,500. See, that way, if we have valve reliefs, then we could go lots more duration and get that tight lobe separation angle that everybody likes, it that there's no piston, there's never already piston to valve clearance for. Nitromethane will definitely get it to 600. I've got a Vortec Max truck intake lying around my shop. It's at the intake better than any 6-liter truck intake. I don't know what a Vortec Max truck is. That's a designation given to the kind of truck, but I don't know about the intake manifold. For me, the truck intake manifolds are only 2, but now there's 3 that I have to worry about. It's either the early truck or the Trailblazer SS. Ryan, so this is I'm going to assume some things because I don't want to keep asking questions about it. I'll assume it's a stock bottom end. And so you're wanting to make power 6,500 RPM in an S10 truck with a 411 gear and 3,500 stall. So you could try the camshaft that we have in this 5.3 with the right intake manifold. It would be 6,500 RPM, or the red hot cam would be a good option for that. Don't know if knock limit equals max torque, but on an imbalanced motor, I assume the leanest cylinder will knock first. I'm curious if that max safe rich airfield is much different than the typical 11 or 12. Yeah, the imbalanced cylinder, the leanest cylinder is the one that's going to knock first, or the hottest cylinder, or the one that has some sort of localized hotspot on it, because that is also a possibility. But my point was that balancing them all, you're still going to find out which one is most sensitive. Richard, are the B&M super injection superchargers any good? I don't know about the super injection. That was the stuff that they put on top of that. I don't think I would use that, but the supercharger was fine. Those work good. We ran a lot of those. What about a BTR 427 max cam 250, 270? Would it make more power on the 5.3 than the cam we use? A 250, 270 cam won't fit on that motor. It won't fit on the available piston to valve clearance. Someone needs to compare that's really a good idea. The iron versus the aluminum 317 heads. That actually would be a good test. Now I kind of want those iron heads, but they're so expensive to ship. No, Julius, I think that's it. I like also the damper idea because I have run the small ATI dampers, and those are good. That should be worth some power. And you have vacuum pump there? Yeah, that would be good. You got a 2-for-1 deal? Okay, Julius. It's exact 87 millimeter 4-bolt from the Gen 4 motors. It's angled slightly up to the 2005 came with a weird E40 PCM. Gen 3 with AFM, front cam sensor, but 1X2. Wow. That's about the same time that they were doing the LS2, right? Because I remember getting an LS2 and they said, we're going to give the GM actually gave me an LS2. They said, we're going to give you an LS2, but it's weird. It's what was wrong with it? It was a 58 and a 1 or a 24 and a 3. It was some weird combination of half Gen 3 and half Gen 4 stuff. And we got so that we could run it, but it was, I remember that it was odd. How much power can you gain with a lightweight flywheel versus a heavy one? I need to go back and look. It was definitely measurable. What do you think about a 5-liter Coyote engine? I've done lots of testing on the first generation Coyote stuff, and I think that they work really well. They make a lot of power. They have very, very good, and the later stuff even more so. They have very, very good cylinder heads. I mean, it's a 4-valve head. It's a proper 4-valve head, and they have good intake manifolds on them. Everything about them is good. The only thing I don't like, and I would complain about the Coyote stuff, is the bore spacing needs to be bigger. The only thing better than a 5-liter Coyote would be a 6-liter Coyote or a 7-liter Coyote. If they had bore spacing and they didn't use the bore spacing that they used in the other 4, 6, 2-valve and 3-valve and 4-valve stuff, and we could make that motor bigger, it would be, it'd be even better. Not that there is really any shortage of power available from them right now, but the info I found is the iron, the aluminum heads have the exact same flow. That'd be interesting. And see, that might actually be, now that we're talking about it, now you got me all fired up. That might be the closest thing that we can get to iron versus aluminum to find out if we lose a whole point of compression and all the power from the aluminum head. So we'd have to find, I think I have a set of 317 heads. I think that they're Troy's, but there might be another set there. But that would be a good test. $540 is impressive, but 60 more is going to be a big accomplishment. Yeah, 600 horsepower is a long ways away. Gen 6 big block, do you have to keep both oil bypass valves? I'd have to go look it up again. I know that we modified at least one of them. An RPM air gap on a 408 with that camshaft, I don't know if it's going to make power all the way to 6,500. I don't think it's going to. Although that's a pretty good sized camshaft. Let me see. I don't know if I used a stroker 427. I think this is a much smaller cam though. Oh no, this is a power for. Yeah, it might. It's a 185 head, so that's a 238, 242 cam. it made peak power at 5,900, but it had the same power at 6,000, 61, 62, or within 1 horsepower. So it might, let's just say yes, it will pull fine to 6,500. Coyotes are gigantic. Yeah, they're big. They're big and wide. There's no doubt about that. Oh, Julius, thanks a lot, man. I've just heard for every 10 pounds of rotating mass you eliminate, you gain the equivalent of losing 200 pounds on the car. Why would you lose the point of compression? No, that's just the discussion. That the discussion is that the aluminum head, if you have the same static compression, the aluminum head dissipates the heat so rapidly that you lose power with the aluminum head compared to an iron head. That's what the iron head people are telling you. I don't know that that's actually the case. Given how fast this is happening, I don't know that that's right, but it would be a good test. Boost novice. Yeah, the super injection is just like I think it's a 4150 4-hole deal, if I remember right. But a carburetor should go right on the top of that blower. Thumble, I understand your thing about equalizing the air fuel in all the cylinders. What I can tell you is when I did that, and there's a video up already where I did that, because we ran it with a carburetor, we ran it with a 4150 4-hole throttle body and port injection. We ran it batch, we ran it sequential, which doesn't do anything because you're delivering the same amount of fuel. But then I did individual cylinder trims where we made all of them the same, and it really didn't gain much power doing that. (2005) LS2 and LH6 are both the same weird Gen 3.5. Yeah. Did they have Gen 4 rods in those, Travis? Building 5.3 for my 65 Malibu. Have you tried the Monster Cam from Texas Speed on the dyno? I haven't tried that. Will there be a cylinder distribution with boost video? There already is. That's already up. It came up right after the other one on the carbureted single plane and dual plane. How high do you think you need to rev a 5.3 to make 600? I think we need to do more than just run RPM. We have to get it to make power, not just make RPM. But I don't know. That's not 2 horsepower per cubic inch. So that's certainly within reason. But motors that do that are not stock bottom end junkyard motors. They're way more than that. We need the poll that says that you should test. Okay, can a stock bottom end ever make 600 horsepower? 76% are saying yes. So we'll have a new poll because we have a few minutes left. This will be should I compare iron and aluminum 317 6-liter LS heads? Please be 100%. How different is the new 5.5 Corvette engine to normal LT series? It actually has the same bore spacing. I was talking to Brian about that, and I didn't know that. So he told me about that, and he said that's. I said, well, that's kind of awesome. I said maybe that's because they're listening to people in the aftermarket talk about the fact that this Richard guy constantly lamenting the fact that Ford put small bore spacing on the modular motors, and that limits the displacement. And I don't like that. I want to be able to build 6 or 7 or 8 liter whatever motors out of these things, because like I said, a 6 liter Coyote, just imagine how killing it that would be. But the new Chevy motor is a small block Chevy bore spacing. What's the practical difference between a short runner BTR manifold and a fast short runner manifold? The fast, are you talking about the one that's adjustable with the short runners in it, or are you talking about the LSX HR one, the one that's like the performance design one? The answer to that is I don't know. I haven't run the Trinity versus the short runner fast manifold. I think the Trinity will make more power. I'll have to call James and see if they've done tests on that adjustable fast to see how it compares. Overbuilt, what's up? All LS2s had Gen 4 rods. Looking to try and build a 3rd gen 6-liter twin 72 millimeter. Should I use a 317 heads or a set of 260 heads I have on the shelf? Well, is the PRC a 260 head? Is that an aftermarket casting? If it is, and you're trying to max those 72 millimeter turbos out, I would pick those just because you should have more sealing with that. After tuning K20 Hondas, I bet an advanced intake center line that normally goes along with a tight lobe separation angle fixed cam isn't going to jive with making horsepower above 7,700. I'm not certain that we would be done right now making power, even if we put a 7,700 RPM ceiling on it. I think that there are other things that we could do to make more power, even within that range. Now, obviously, 8,000 is going to be better if we can get it to continue to go out there. Joined in late, but had to watch the 5.3 make 540 horsepower. Nice. That's good. We like that. You got to do your homework before you come into class, right? A couple of days ago, I came across an article you wrote for Street Muscle Magazine. Street Muscle Magazine. I don't even recognize that. It was for a set of 290 Edelbrock heads on the Gen 6 454 with a 224 cam. We're going to see that test on YouTube. I don't know. I have to go look that up now and see what it was. Horsepower Monster did a video of the vacuum pump on a big block Chevy and it lost 50 horsepower disconnecting the pump. That seems like a lot, but if the motor is set up with, and this is one thing that we found on the dyno, is that a vacuum pump by itself doesn't always do a whole bunch. But if you have the ring pack set up to work with the vacuum pump, then you could see maybe losses like you're talking about there. Spoke today with a reputable engine builder, starting with a 5.3 iron block. His recommend boring it to a 5.7, decking the block to bump compression, and has a recommended 706 heads. What kind of build is this? Why would you put 706 heads on it if you're going to do all the rest of that stuff? Why wouldn't you put some sort of ported head on there to make lots of power? I know 2 poles in 1 live stream. I know that's how we do it. Really? It's only 78% that want to compare an iron to an aluminum head? The Coyote is a modular motor family. It's the same. It shares the same bore spacing. Yes, Gen 4 rod. I still have the motor. Okay. Is the Hemi also limited in displacement because of bore spacing? Yeah, Julius, those were 410-inch motors, I think, is what their limit was when they did Engine Masters. So those are big modular motors. Burnsy's in the house. just in time, a couple minutes. Have you tried conical springs? I have run conical springs. I haven't done a test of a conical spring versus a beehive spring or versus a dual spring that I can remember. But the design of the spring itself might work and might do the things that you're talking about, but it's not a universal thing. And the best place to test that would be I'm sure Brian and I think it's Kyle have Spintron data, which would be much better than the engine dyno. On LM4 aluminum 5.3, I have a monster cam, lifters, rods, springs, rock arms, fast. Should I get higher flow injectors? You have to have an injector that flows enough to feed the power output of the motor. Stock injectors won't do that. Not the one you're talking about there. There's an article from 2017, says 6 years ago. Under the title says Words and Pictures by Richard Holdner. I'll have to look up the data and see. Do you already have the answer to the first poll? No, I don't. I just got back yesterday from running that motor, from running the 540 horsepower version. I have no idea if it will do that. Force spacing, motor mount perches, and bell housing. Yeah, they all bolt up the same, right? 6.1 has a bigger bore, but limited by piston to valve clearance and stock valve train. Oh, on the Hemis, yep. For a 7-liter or bigger Coyote, you might be persuaded to ditch my Cleveland or FE stuff. Can you recommend injectors? We normally run the go-to set of injectors for most people, and you don't need anything this big, but we normally put 80s in everything. But you probably could get away with I think a factory. See, I don't know how to recommend the injector to you because I don't know what height injector you need for your intake manifold and your fuel rail and stuff. I'm not as concerned about that because we just make it work. We just space it or whatever we have to do. But for yours, I don't know. But like a 46-pound injector for that naturally aspirated motor would probably be enough. LM4 had 50s or 60s. Was it a dual fuel deal? LM4 is 24 pounds. I thought that they were small. Unless it's the dual fuel stuff. Head gasket retention between the iron and aluminum 6-liter head would be an interesting subject. Head lift and thicker decks on aftermarket heads might play into the conversation. That's not the test that I would be interested in doing on the 317 heads. I just would want to see if they're set up exactly the same, so they have the same chamber size. I'm assuming that the ports are the same. We would flow them and see if the flow is the same at every lift range. I kind of have to assume that the port shape would be the same or very, very similar. Both on the intake and the exhaust. So if that's the case, then I would be interested just in running the head on an NA motor, running those two heads on an NA motor and seeing if there's any difference in power. Because people tell us that iron heads make more power all the time. I get that all the time, especially from old school guys. Barely 2 horsepower per cubic inch is easy. I've never done that. So that's, well, on a Honda motor, we can do that pretty easily, but not on one of these LS motors. Bore the L33 to 5.7. I think it would be interesting only because I've seen Freiberger try it, but the heads that they got to do it, and I think that they were from Dart, They just weren't the same. The ports weren't the same. The flow rate wasn't the same. They were supposed to be the same head, but apparently when you do a mold for an aluminum head and an iron head, that they're just not the same, because the heads didn't. They have the same name and they're supposed to have the same port volume and stuff, but they didn't. Uh, 2005 LH6 had 30-pound injectors. That's enough to support a fairly good amount of power. What is that? 480? Yeah, and I actually think they'll go more than that, because a 0.5 brake specific is not like a real brake specific for an LS. They're always in the low fours. Dude's trying to troll you. Apparently, you build 623 horsepower 5.3s all day long. That's easy to do. That's only like 8 or 9 pounds of boost. Always thought an aluminum head makes more power, all things being equal, because of fluctuating cylinder head temps and the aluminum head spending more time cooler than the heat-soaked iron heads. That's the thing. So here's the thing. How does the aluminum head, or how does the iron head, the guys that are talking about iron heads making more power, how does the iron head make more power? Except the aluminum or the iron intake doesn't make more power. Richard, I heard if you cram lots of extra fuel and air at say 7 psi in a junkyard motor, it would be a world beater. That's right. The iron 6-liter head doesn't have a 243 port. It doesn't have that. Well, then a 317 won't have that either, right? I have the flow numbers from the 317 and 243 heads. And what I wonder though, if you take one 317 head and you take one iron head and you flow them, and let's say they're not exactly the same, or if you flow two 317 heads, will they also not be exactly the same? Those are the things that keep me up at night. So we're gonna go ahead, and our poll. I can't believe our poll is not 100%. 73%, 27% are saying no. That is definitely on the list now. So whoever offered me the iron heads, yes, I would like to run the iron heads. The iron 6-liter head came in the early 99 and 2000 6-liters in the LQ4s. Yeah, Julius, that's right. The iron head will definitely not accelerate as fast, because it's definitely going to be heavier. How much heat can you absorb in 1/100 of a second? That's why I try to talk to people about this heat soak thing. Steve, making 500 horsepower on a 5.3 with a stock head is going to be hard to do, because the head kind of has just enough flow. I've made 500 with a 799 or a 243 head. We did that on a 6-liter, so the draw is a lot greater, but it takes a pretty big cam. It takes the big kind of cam that barely fits available piston to valve clearance on a 6-liter with a stock head to make that power. But it might be able to be done on a 5.3, but it's going to have a big cam in it, and probably not with a fast manifold. I don't think. Maybe with a higher RPM manifold. Do the iron 317s have the big chambers? I think that they do. I think that there's. I was told they're a duplicate, so it probably is, because I think that they had the same static compression in those motors that they did in the later ones. By that logic, EGR doesn't cool the combustion chamber. See, there's all kinds of stuff to talk about. Have you done any testing on an L86? I haven't run an L86 at West Tech, but I have L86 data from the stuff that Brian Tooley did and James did over there. Apparently, the 317 243 intake port came out in 2001. The iron 6-liter head is different, but no one has actually tested it because it's iron. So where does that information come from then? Does nobody have flow data on that iron head? Apparently, that's something I need to put out into the world then, right? That's something that the world needs. So it would disappoint me if they're not the same, because then it's just an iron head versus an aluminum head test. That's not something I want to do. I really, really want them to be the same. It would make sense that if they were making a new head and they're making a new aluminum head, that they would make it better than the one that they made before. But yeah, we know the casting number is different on the head, but I don't. But I want the port volume and all that to be the same. Chamber valve sizes, I'm sure, is the same. Film 4 was stock with a returnless fuel system. I'm doing an external pump, and I'm going to install a return to my tank. I'll have to do any modifications on the tune. If the motor is all stock, you can run it with a stock tune regardless of what fuel system that you're using, unless the computer was controlling your fuel pump. But if you keep if you have a vacuum reference going to your regulator and you have it set at whatever the standard pressure was, which is normally 58 psi, it should work fine. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up, and I will be off tomorrow, but I'll try to check in, see what you guys are doing. FYI, Airflow Research released their oval port dual plane that will match. Yeah, I've seen they were testing it at West Tech. They were testing the dual plane. I haven't tested it yet, but I remember them talking about it. I saw one there on the table. But I'll see you guys all later.